Those of you who follow politics, and we all do because we are in one of the most politically savvy regions of America in northeastern Pennsylvania, you know well that I have tried every way possible to get United States Representative Joe Sestak to name names. I've written an online column. I've asked him personally on this show to tell us who, as he claims in the White House, offered him a job if he stepped out of the Senate race against Arlen Specter. Sestak wants the nomination in the Democratic primary on May 18th, and Sestak absolutely refuses to name names. I told him he started this, and now he really needs to finish this. Arlen Specter and others, including our next guest, California Congressman Issa, believe that a crime might have been committed if, in fact, what Sestak says happened actually happened. Congressman Issa is asking for a special prosecutor. I agree that a special prosecutor is warranted. I also believe that a federal grand jury ought to be convened, before which Congressman Sestak can be called and sworn to testify under oath, under threat of perjury. This is that important. Congressman Issa, thanks so much for joining the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I couldn't agree with you more that until or unless Joe is willing to do what is his responsibility as an elected public official, and that is disclose this crime and who he's accusing but not naming, the pressure should not be let down and will not be let down.
We spoke with Congressman Sestak just the other day, and I later wrote a column in which I said I felt like I was Woodward and Bernstein. I asked Sestak, are you protecting the president? And he took us into left field with an answer. Are you there?
Yes, I am. I thought you were going to play it, but now, look, here's the challenge I have. I don't have a dog in the fight in your primary in Pennsylvania. I don't really care who the primary person is, and both before and after the primary, my question is going to stay the same, is who committed two crimes? One, bribing to try to get somebody to do something. Two, trying to interfere with an election in process. And I don't know who that person is other than the congressman has said that it's somebody in the White House.
If Attorney General Eric Holder does not respond to you, and you've written him at least one letter that I'm aware of, what can you do, Congressman Issa?
Well, the next step is not a step that any of us in the House relish, but ultimately if the administration and the Attorney General want to cover up for their own indiscretion, at least alleged indiscretion, then the next step will be to go to the House Ethics Committee, file an ethics complaint against the congressman for his knowingly covering up a felony, which he has owned up to alleging. We in the House have a special obligation, and you may not have known this when he was on your show, but his obligation is an ethical one over and above a legal one, and ethically knowing about one or more felonies, partially divulging but then not going the rest of the way, would be an ethical violation by any stretch of the imagination for those of us who serve in the House of Representatives.
I also believe that when we spoke with Congressman Sestak just the other day, he confirmed once again that, yes, his story is true, and then he drew the line in providing any details. I find that there is real concern here that someone who is a member of the House of Representatives would basically let the cat out of the bag and then just tell us that it's not relevant. And that's the word that he used when we spoke last.
Well, it may not be relevant to his primary. I'll agree with him that it may not be relevant to his primary, but it's relevant to what my committee cares about, which is criminal activity in the executive branch, unethical activity in the executive branch, and, in fact, abuse of your taxpayer dollars in the executive branch. That's the primary thing that government oversight does, is we look toward that $2 trillion worth of spending and try to make sure that it's spent better than it historically is.
I'll tell you why this issue is relevant to his primary campaign. We in northeastern Pennsylvania are currently immersed in an ongoing federal public corruption probe that has already netted dozens of elected and appointed public officials, as well as some members of the business community, most of whom have pleaded guilty. The reason this issue is relevant is because when looking for candidates, character matters. And this goes to the heart of Joe Sestak's own characterization of himself as a man of great courage and a patriot's patriot, is how he referred to himself after having been described that way. What do your colleagues on both sides of the aisle say here? I'm taking a hard line, and I'm a liberal Democrat.
Well, I'd be considered a conservative Republican in just about any circle, but I'll tell you the story that we talk about with Joe, and that is, even though he hasn't done anything as wrong as Duke Cunningham, Navy Commander Duke Cunningham was a patriot's patriot, and yet he committed crimes and covered them up while he was on the Select Intelligence Committee, and ultimately the House didn't do what we should do, and federal prosecutors eventually did. In the case of Congressman Sestak, our concern is he's even let us know there's a crime, and yet he won't do the right thing and end the mystery about who offered of it. You know, understanding, and I'm not saying this is the case, but let's just say that person A in the White House offered him the job. Well, the very next thing, once he names the name, is, okay, who told that person in the White House to do it? On what authority did he do it? Does the trail lead up to the president? Does it lead over to the DNC? Does it lead back to Arlen Specter? Or was it simply a rogue act of somebody in the White House who thought this would be a good political end, and it may not be Rahm Emanuel, it may be somebody very different position. But until we know that, we don't know how deep the crime is, whether it does have bearing on the upcoming election. And, you know, Pennsylvania has historically been moving toward Democratic Party people. This is not about changing that. It is about Joe doing the right thing, and then we'll do what we're supposed to do in the House. The executive branch does what they're supposed to do, and Joe can go on. And if he's a patriot's patriot, he certainly doesn't want to cover up a felony.
Now, you're the ranking member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and you were quoted in the Washington Post recently as saying that the White House's silence is virtually an admission that they do not quarrel with Representative Sestak's account. That's a chilling thought to have.
Well, it has to be that way because every White House is quick to deny, often with little nuances of how they deny. And when they don't deny, when the closest to a denial we get is, well, we've checked and we didn't find anything problematic. And then when the press understandably says, would you please define the term problematic, and who is it that wasn't guilty but you didn't see a problem but did something, it tells us they did find somebody who said something, and they're now indirectly saying, well, but we don't think it rises to a crime. Well, that's not an answer to the press's question, which a transparent government, and the last administration doesn't get an A in transparency, but now neither does this. A transparent administration doesn't withhold things like this from the press. They have a reasonable right to say who offered a job or who had a conversation that you're saying is not problematic.
I'm a longtime newspaper guy, and although some members of the press did initially ask these questions at press conferences at the White House, the press coverage now has seemed to diminish. Are you troubled by the lack of aggressive coverage of this issue?
I'm troubled, but I'm not surprised. You know, as a beat reporter, you can go just about anywhere and keep asking questions. But you can't go back into, let's say, a restaurant 12 times before the owner says you're not welcome here, and you dare not go back in, or he's going to accuse you of trespassing. Well, the White House has a step above that. They've got these guys called Secret Service on the door, and if they pull your credentials, you're gone, and your newspaper has to put somebody else in or not be represented. So there is a chilling effect that occurs over time of asked and answered, asked and answered. If you keep asking, you're not going to be welcome here. And the press corps really does relish their positions there, even Fox, even though they're not particularly liked, they relish being there. So I think that's what it boils down to, is they've asked as many times as they can. As I said, if Joe cannot bring himself to do the ethical thing, I'm not going to stand by the way they did for so long with Duke Cunningham and give him the benefit of the doubt. He's going to have to say something further, or quite frankly, he's covering up a crime, and that's unethical behavior for a member of the House.
I know you've got a busy day. I'll let you go after this question. In my last interview with Congressman Sestak, I said to him that his critics are saying very clearly, Joe, either you're lying or you're covering up. Which is it? And we didn't get a clear answer on that. Do you believe his claim, Congressman Issa?
I believe that somebody said something to him. Now, whether it stands the scrutiny of an honest answer from the White House, that may be the crux of it, is that he doesn't want to name the name because the controversy between what he characterized and what somebody would characterize in the White House may be a problem. But, you know, once you launch a mortar, you don't reclaim it. It's going to land somewhere, and this is very much an unguided missile that is going to come down. And it would be better for Joe if it came down now, so that even if that person says that's not what I meant or that's not how I said it, at least the controversy would just be a question of two people's understanding. But right now it's a question of who lied.
Well, one thing the left and the right can find as common ground, I believe, is honesty. Honesty is the best policy, and I encourage your efforts to continue trying to find the truth in this matter. Thank you for joining us, Congressman Issa. Okay, we'll take a break. We'll be back. 446.